Welcome back to the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. I'm your host, Mr. U. If you're watching us for the very first time, first off, thanks for making us part of your week. We're live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube, and of course, across all social media and audio and listening platforms. Thanks for making us part of your day. We're excited about this. If you have a question for myself or our guest today, drop it in the comment in the chat where you actually see in this episode. Happy to answer those relevant questions pertaining to our topics for today. In studio with us, educator and co-author of the book, Born of Nothing, From White Trash and Lintheads to Purpose Across Generations. Dr. Donald Williams is here. Donald, how are you, sir? Good to see you.
I'm doing great. How are you, sir?
Fantastic, man. Good to have you here, man. I want to get into some things because we have a limited amount of time. So I want to definitely hit all the high points. I understand you were raised in York County, South Carolina. That's close to me because I got some family that just moved out there, so I'm excited to hear more about the area and the atmosphere. It's pretty awesome. You mentioned something about your work there, well, your parents worked in that area. Can you kind of speak to that? What was significant about that time and the kind of work they were doing?
Yes, sir. And this, I'll give you some history here as I'm telling you this. In Rock Hill, South Carolina, that's where I was born, which is York County. It's kind of the main hub. It's right below Charlotte, North Carolina. There's actually a main kind of square area, the hometown, kind of like the old street. Very near there is a place called the Industrial Mill. It was the J.P. Stevens Industrial Mill. That's where my parents both worked in the cotton mills. And it's also where I spent the majority of my childhood. There was what we call the Mill Hill. And there's a road there called Dave Lyle Boulevard. And if you ever go there, you will see some big statues called the Civitas. And it's very near York Technical College. And that's where I spent my summers or my childhood. And so I'm very interested, and that's actually very exciting to me that someone would actually know or be familiar with that area or maybe visit there someday, because that's where, as a child, and we're talking 50 years ago, 55 years ago, that I was running around those hills and those mill villages and those houses and around the mill. And my parents worked there in the cotton mills. And let me kind of give a point of reference here. In the title of the book, Lintheads, people who worked in the mills were called Lintheads because when they came out, they would be covered in cotton dust or cotton.
Oh, wow.
And they this particular mill, they made blue jean material. So that's what they did. And my father was what they call a beamer, and my mother was a weaver. And my father, I don't want to explain all the processes of the mill, but my father's job was basically like drawing out all the string, and my mother's job was weaving it together to make the cloth. And they would bring home rope from the mill. They'd bring home spare cloth from the mill, and they would make things for us. I tell everyone, when I went to college, I was in homemade clothes. I had my mother made a duffel bag out of blue jean material that I stuffed a few belongings I had in to go to college. And so it's real different society. That's a long time ago. All the mills are shut, of course, now. And
that's something about that. Yeah. It seems like a lot of the mills are all seem to be closing. So it's kind of seem to be a bit of a trend. One of the things I think is pretty awesome, in fact, I understood that right, you're the first in your family to graduate from a major university.
Oh, yes. As a matter of fact, that was one of the big premises of the book. Now, there's a co-author, Jason, and I'm going to say his family came from a different concept of the hills, mountains of North Carolina. Mine came from the cotton mill, and that's where that term Linthead. Gaffney, South Carolina, and Rock Hill, South Carolina, my grandparents came from there. My grandfathers both worked in the mills when they were about 9. My father started working in the mills when he was 14. My mother when she was 16. The concept then was there was no need to go to school because you were going to end up in the mill. That was the only choice. Wow. The only other option maybe was military. There was no concept of being able to go to a college unless you were a fabulous athlete. And even then, in those days, poor kids just didn't really even get that opportunity. So your only way out was really to risk your life by going to the military. And so it came down to, I had three older brothers who got married. The expectation then, when my brothers just was in the mid 70s, graduating high school was like a big deal. And the teachers would tell a lot of students, they would say, you just need to quit. There's no need for you to be here. They would just tell them. I mean, I've witnessed it. There's no need for you to come back. Just go ahead and go to work. All three of my brothers graduated high school, which was a big deal, but they all got married within a month or so of graduating high school, and they all went directly to work. And so when it came to me, I was youngest. My mother and father, it's like, what would you like to do? And I remember going to the guidance counselor at the school, and she was like, what would you like to do? It was almost like she was asking me, what meal do you want to work in?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I was thinking about college, and I remember the surprised look on her face. It's like, how dare you? You're
Wow.
You're low class. You can't do this. You're a nobody. And but I will say this, and this same counselor, I worked with her later on in life, very sweet lady, and gave me some really good advice. She said, you need to take the SAT, which I didn't even know what it was. No one had ever told me that. You need to fill out this application. And I went home and talked to my mother and my father, hey, I'd like to go to college. And they were like, well, we're at this point in life. They had paid off all their bills. They both had jobs. And they said, we can send you. And if you can go. And so I was able to get accepted. Now, and I'll say this, I had 42 aunts and uncles, 80 something first cousins whom I grew up with in York County. And I was the first, yes, to be able to go and excel at that. It took a little time. It wasn't perfect at first, but over the years, yes, I did. But I never have forgotten my past.
That's an incredible story, man. Love that you mentioned Gaffney. That's where my alma mater is, Limestone College up there. So
really,
every time I hear Gaffney, kind of light up like, okay, cool. I like this. All right. So one of the things that it's really awesome to hear, since I'm from New York City originally, but I moved down to the South around 96 or so. So I'm getting the chance to hear, I call it a privilege to hear a lot of the stories about the American South. There's a lot more than what you read about in the textbook.
Absolutely.
Read about in the news. There's a lot more really rich stories in regards to that. But I love, on the heels of that, I love for you to explain really briefly what generational change means to you, because you talked about yourself being one of the first to do college, and your sons also are history makers in your family. What does generational change mean for you, and how do families achieve that?
Okay, I'm going to go back just a second. You went to Gaffney, or you went to Limestone. The peach actually made the peachoid on the I-85 made my book, and the co-author is from Fingerville. I don't know if you've heard of that, but that's right outside. And it's right outside of Gaffney, going into on Highway 9. But anyway, so that generational change. When I worked in South Korea, and I was working with this Korean friend of mine, very nice lady. And she talked about her father was an immigrant to the United States. And she told me their concept was, in their culture, was that the children would be one step above the generation before. She said, my father was a tenant farmer, but who ends up owning a store. And she said, he sent me to college. I'm a teacher. I want my son to be a lawyer, doctor, that kind of thing. And so that was our concept of that generational change. For us, in that concept of that lint head meal, there was no concept that you could be better. Your only concept was you were captive to the mill owners. They were your provider. They gave you the church. They gave you the schools. They provided basically the police force. They provided your house. You bought food from the mill store. They gave you gifts at Christmas. Everything centered right around that. And there was nothing else you could do. That's what I'm saying. There was that concept was right there. And so when I broke out of that, and I'll say this, my brothers were wildly successful within what they did, but they all still live in York County. They're all still right there. I was, for me to move and to go somewhere else to live, to even go to Clemson, from there was just like, to them, it was like, you might as well be going to the other side of the world. It made
Mm.
no sense to them. And so through that concept of people seeing that you can make it, that you can get out of this, that you don't have to work for the mill. And I'll say this: my oldest son graduated last week with a PhD from Liberty University. My youngest son has a doctorate in ministry and is a pastor. And they've lived around the world and have been around the world. Um, I have nephews and nieces who are teachers, educators who have graduated college, and I'm not saying it's because of me, but it's because my family started to see there was a way out, that you don't have to be tied down to what other people think you should be, or where they think your position in life is. You can break out of that mold, and anyone can.
Love that.
And that's just, I mean, it's difficult at times, but with that determination, you can do that.
I
And
love that.
and when you do that, you inspire other people that's your relatives to do the same thing. You can go, hey, look, there's another world out here that we can explore, that we can do. And
Yeah,
so it's worked for us.
I like that. So, there's I feel like there's inherent pressure and challenges in kind of being a breakout artist, if you will. When you leave the area that is everybody knows you for, and it's kind of a very low ceiling
Yep.
that people kind of can see for you. What are some of the pressures and the challenges that you face or have faced by being a breakout artist in that sense?
Well, I went back to where I graduated high school from. I ended up working back there as a teacher for, I don't remember, maybe 15 years. I went back
Hmm.
there, and that concept was, and I want to say this, I tried to lift up every student in my class. And my whole concept was, I wanted to help everyone in my class. I didn't want, every teacher's going to have a teacher's pet. You can't hardly help it. But I wanted to make certain that every student in my classroom had the opportunity, like I had an opportunity, and I wanted to show them, you can make it. Those obstacles, so that's so difficult to overcome for so many students. So really, financing, just having that concept of, how will I ever be able to afford this without going into a massive amount of debt, which is really difficult. It's just, thank God that we have programs in South Carolina, and where I'm at in Georgia now, the educational lottery system, and like in South Carolina, I think this is still the rule. You can go to a technical college for free. If you graduate high school, technical college is free, just so long as you maintain a certain grade level. And so,
Okay.
so a lot of times those things are there. But now those things that I'm going to say, there's some things that still hold you back, and that's society, because there are people who will look at you, and I had this people look at me and go, how are you're just a lint head? Your parents are lint heads. How do you ever think you're going to go anywhere, do anything? And I laugh about this. When I went to college, like I said, I had a duffel bag. Everyone else is coming in, and maybe designer suitcases and everything else. Here I am coming in my homemade clothes my mom had stitched so proudly for me, that I was happy to wear and I was proud of. And I was never ashamed of that. I also, for a time in my life, I've lived in a single wide trailer. And someone asked me recently, actually the co-author of the book asked me, he says, were you ever ashamed to live in that? And I was like, uh, not really. He said, were you aware that people were looking down on you? And I said, yeah, maybe so, but it didn't matter to me, because I had a mama and father who loved me, and I had a God who loved me, and I didn't really care about what other people thought of me, because I knew in my heart who I was. And I think that's a big thing too, that people who, you cannot feel that you're second class, because you know what, our God doesn't look at us as second class. God looks at us as, you're my child. And I think that's what that was what was instilled in me. And so I would never let go of that.
I love that, man. I love that. We got time for maybe another question, maybe two, if we work it out well. You, you you're doing something incredible by stepping out and taking this approach to breaking generational cycles and being more than what people said you could become. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what's your big goal, man. I mean, the goal that you wake up every day saying, you know what, if I don't do anything else, this is the one that I want to achieve. I'd love to hear that from you.
Okay, I'm going to go backwards for just a second. My goal as an educator was to make education available for everyone, and that was my life goal, was to do that and to ensure that schools were functioning well and that every child had that opportunity. And that was really a burning passion for me. And I look back on it now and I think, I guess, because I know where I came from. But now I retired a year ago. So what is my goal now? Now I will say this. Um, my son is a pastor. I'm not trying to plug this in any kind of way, but he's a pastor of a local church that's pretty big. And I do all I can there to help them. So that's a goal, is to help my family, to help my children, to be, help them in their life. But I'm think right now I'm really kind of starting to redefine that goal for me, because like I said, I just left the education part behind. And I'll be very honest with you, it hurt. I woke up the next day and I'm like, what, what now? What's going on? And so for me, I am doing more writing and I've got some projects in the work with that. But I think it's to kind of get that message of hope out, uh, that you don't have to be tied down. Um, it doesn't matter. And I have a line on this. It doesn't matter. Don't let where you're born define your outcome. Uh, never forget it, remember it, cherish it, whatever it be, learn lessons from it, but be yourself. And so I think my goal now would be to spread that, not just to my family, to my grandsons and granddaughters, but to anyone who would like to listen to that, and help other people understand that.
Yeah, it's really good, man. Thank you for coming on and sharing such a transparent, powerful story, man. I really appreciate that. I know that somebody's watching and listening, or will do that on replay. It's going to be inspired by this. In closing, I'm going to ask you to do a couple of things for me. One, let folks know where they can find you and your work,
Okay.
but also offer encouragement for those that are thinking about reading your book, Born of Nothing, and why, and what they should find, what they're going to find when they read it. You should do both for me, and then we'll close out. Go ahead.
Okay, so you can find me. You can look up information on me on iamdonaldwilliams.com. No dots or anything other than the .com, but iamdonaldwilliams.com. There you
And that's
go.
on screen right now. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll see that. And then so they can see my story. Also, I do write music. I don't write music for anyone else, but for me and my family. But I have some things there. If they won't, maybe they would laugh at it. I don't know, but it's there. But it's inspirational things for me. I think a lot of times poetry, lyrics, things like that are internal. They're not external, but it's internal for me. The other part about reading the book, I will say this. It's not for children to read. It has some graphic pieces in it because of the nature of the story. That it's not a perfect story that because I haven't really went into this. I have a cousin who's on death row in California. I have a cousin that's in life in prison in Columbia, South Carolina, whom I grew up with as very close friends. And so, I have a lot of I will say there's a lot of hurt and a lot of problems. So when people read the story, they need to realize they're going to see, some bad things. But the message of hope is, that through all this, through that turmoil, you can come out on the other end. And so, a lot of times we want to paint, oh, I had this wonderful, my parents were wonderful and all this. But a lot of those aunts and uncles and cousins that were around me were not so wonderful. And I was also influenced by that. And so when they read that book, if they read that book, realize they're going to see some graphic kind of type things that went on that were not very nice. But it's also a story to show you that there's some very bad things that can happen, but still through all that, you can still come out on the other side. And my co-author, Jason, to think about him, he was labeled as like learning disadvantaged, and he ends up being a colonel in the Army. And yeah, which is just a tremendous story, that you can go from. Same thing, like I said, same thing with me. Child of Linthead, end up being the education research analyst for the Department of Defense around the world. How do I get to that point, But the book shares those stories.
Thank you very much for sharing the book and your story with us. It's definitely inspirational. The show is where stories spark action, and you definitely have to be sparking action in somebody today, at least in me, at least. So I'm excited about this. Excited to meet you, Dr. Donald, and thanks for coming on and sharing part of your day with us. I appreciate it.
Oh, it was my pleasure. And hey, I enjoy your podcast. It's really good. It's very, very inspirational to me. And thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
The pleasure's mine. If you guys are watching for the first time, thanks again for making Dr. Donald and myself part of your week. This is the Inspiration Station where stories spark action. You can find us, of course, across social media platform. Wherever you are, follow us on social media. Follow us on our YouTube channel. Help us out so we can put out more great content like this show with Dr. Donald. So thanks again. That's Dr. Donald Williams. I'm Mr. U. Have a great day. Stay inspired.